How to use JReleaser with Jenkins. Command line interface applications, or CLIs, are all the rage these days. If you're coming from the Go world, you're probably using Go plus Cobra. But if you're a Java developer, you have a few options. One option you can use is Pico CLI. Another option that you can use is Pico CLI and Quarkus together. But really, when you take Pico CLI plus Quarkus plus GraalVM, it's possible to generate native binaries and not have a dependency on having the JVM installed so you can run your CLI. In this video, we're going to take a look at a sample application that we're going to be building for Linux, Mac, and Windows, and then we're going to be releasing those to GitHub via JReleaser. Here's today's starting point. I have a Jenkins LTS controller version 2.332.2, and attached to this controller, I have three agents. I have a macOS agent, I have a Linux-based agent, and I also have a Windows agent. A link to the sample repository that we're going to be reviewing is down in the description of this video. So let's go ahead and go over and take a look at this repository. The code for this repository was created using the Quarkus CLI, and I did a Quarkus create CLI, and it generated a certain amount of boilerplate code. I made a couple of small changes, but nothing really major, and then checked it into this repository. Down in the README that's in this repository, I have links off to all the commands that I ran and the documentation that I followed in order to set up this repository, and also how I'm working with Graal and JReleaser. So again, all of that information is in the README of this repository. Now I've already set up a job on my controller pointing at the Jenkins file 1 that is in this repository. And just so you can see what it is, I have my greeting CLI and I have my Jenkins file -1. Well, what is Jenkins file -1? Well, if we take a look at it, what we're doing is we are using matrix within pipeline. That way I don't have to create explicit stages for each of my agents. I know that I want to build for Linux, Mac, and Windows. So by using matrix, all I have to really provide, other than the plumbing for matrix, is provide the steps that I want to run. Now, if you haven't watched the video about matrix, the link for that is down in the description of the video. Also, the links to how to set up a Linux agent, a Mac agent, and a Windows agent also are all down in the description. Now, you'll also notice here that I have a step called run command. And run command is actually a step that I have in my shared library that I have specified up here at line 1. And what run command does is that it figures out, am I on a Unix-based environment, so Linux or Mac, and then it uses sh to run whatever command that I'm passing in. If it's not Unix, then I'm assuming that it's Windows and I'm going to run the back command. If I would not have created this step, then I would have had to have had a stage that was for Unix, and I would have had a stage that was for not Unix. By creating this very simple custom step within my shared library, then I'm able to go ahead and just simplify my Jenkins file by using just that one step. Now in this first pass, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be outputting the version of Java that we have available for us, and also the version of JReleaser. So let's go ahead and go over to our job and click on Build Now. Now while we're waiting on this to run, and it'll take just about a minute, let's go back over to our repository. What we're going to want to see once we're all said and done is over here in the releases section on GitHub, we're going to see a version of our application released here for all three platforms. And then we'll also see a tag that's associated with this release. So that's where we're headed. Now, let's go ahead and go back over to our controller, and let's see how far along we are. Now, since we are running three different agents all at the same time, we can see we have Linux running, Mac running, and Windows running. As it's running through, then what we have is an intermix of all of our steps. So along with this controller, I have also installed the Blue Ocean plugin so we can visually see what's going on. And if we see here at this very top one, this one I know it says it's on a Unix-like node. If I take a look at it, I know by looking at this, this is going to be the Linux agent based on the outputs that I'm seeing here. If I click on this middle one, I know that this is Mac, and I can see the different versions for Mac here. And finally, this bottom one is Windows, because I can see from here a Windows batch script, and we can see the output for both Java and for JReleaser. Now, I'll stay here for just a second, and if you were paying attention to that as I was clicking through those, then you could see that we have Java 17, specifically GraalVM Java 17, and then we also have JReleaser 1.0.0. In order for me to take my application and turn it into a native binary, I'm needing to use the GraalVM. Now, again, over in the README for the repository, there's links off to the documentation of how to set up the GraalVM on both Windows, on Mac, and on Linux to make sure you can do everything that I am doing. So now that we've verified that we've got the correct version of the JVM, in our case, Java 17, and we've also got JReleaser 1.0.0, now we're ready to go ahead and move forward. So if we go back over to our repository, the next file that we're going to run is Jenkins file 2. Again, very similar to the very first Jenkins file that we looked at, but now we're going to actually be running the commands to do the build. We're still using matrix, and we are going to run 3 commands. We're going to run gu install native image. This is a requirement in order to create a native binary for each of our platforms. Then we're going to say maven w clean package with the native profile. If you were to take a look at the POM XML, the native profile was generated when I created the CLI app from Quarkus. And then once this is built, that creates the files that I need. Then I run maven w package with the dist profile, which will then create zip files and tar.gz files for me. So let's go ahead and go back over to our controller, and let's make a modification and change it to run Jenkins file -2. So we'll go down here to the bottom. We'll change this to 2 and click on build now. Now, this one is going to take much longer. So I'm going to click into this and we're going to zoom in and I'm going to fast forward through this and then we'll come back and take a look at it. And now that it's completed, let's go and take a look at the output of each of the package steps that we have. So from the Linux-based one, what we see if we scroll down to the bottom is we see that it's reading an assembly descriptor, which we have defined over in our repository. If we take a look at it here, under source main assembly, this is where we have defined tar.gz or zip or whatever it is and how we want things defined. And then we see that we created a greeting CLI 001 Linux x86-64 tar.gz and also a zip version of that. And then both of those files were copied into target distributions and then this folder. If we go back and take a look at the macOS version of that, it's going to look very similar. Again, we're copying into a target distributions. The difference here is instead of it being Linux dash, now it's OS X dash x86-64. And similarly, over in Windows, we have roughly the same thing. We have greeting CLI, and then it's Windows dash x86. So we have local binaries for Linux, Mac, and Windows, all on their specific agents, but now what do we do? This is where we go ahead and introduce JReleaser. So if we go back over to our repository, what we're going to see is we have a JReleaser YAML file defined here. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. Let's go ahead and take a look at Jenkins file 3. Again, very similar as before, but we have a few different changes here. First off, we have a JReleaser GitHub token environment variable that is reading a credential, which is a secret text from within the Jenkins credential store. This credential requires that you have repo access. So I've set up a personal access token and I've given it repo access. The JReleaser binary uses this environment variable in order to authenticate with GitHub. So we have to set that up. Next, we're going to run all of our same commands again, but you'll notice here that we've set up a separate stage right after we did our prepare, build, and package. What I have done is I've set up a stage that is going to stash anything that's tar.gz and star.zip. Now, a word of warning. As a best practice, stash is not meant to be used with large files. And a large file is defined as anything greater than 5 megabytes. Not 5 gigabytes, not 5 terabytes, but 5 megabytes. Now, my tar.gz and my zip files are roughly 10 to 11 meg. So for this example, I'm okay showing you how to do it this way, but in real life, what I would do is I would take these files and I would archive them off somewhere else, maybe to a blob store like S3, or maybe put them into a binary repository like Artifactory or Nexus. I would just get them out and off of the agents. Why is that? In my case, when we run JReleaser, I want all of my binaries, my Linux, my Mac, and my Windows binaries all to go up to GitHub all at once. So in order to do that, I need to be able to collect those files, put them together in the same place, so that way when JReleaser uploads those files from wherever it is up to GitHub, they're all already there and available in one place. The other thing I want to make sure is I don't try to do anything with JReleaser until all three have successfully built. So if my Linux and Mac would have worked fine, but Windows would have failed, I don't want my Linux and Mac ones to go up at all. Basically, unless all three build successfully, I don't want anything uploaded to GitHub. So what I'm doing in this case, I'm using Stash. In real life, you shouldn't use Stash, you should put it somewhere else. So ignoring that for a moment, we move these files off of the agents into someplace normal. Then I have a new stage here, and this stage is outside of the matrix. So you can see here the matrix is in this greetings stage. But here I have a standalone agent, and I'm happening to use the Linux agent that was already being used. Instead, what I would probably do is I would have another agent that its whole purpose in life is just to take care of my JReleaser items. So in this case, I would have had a Linux, a Mac, a Windows, and then maybe a fourth agent that was meant only for JReleaser work. But in this case, I'm just re-leveraging what I have to work with today. So what I'm doing is I am unstashing the three stashes that were created. So here you can see I had stash $platform, which got expanded into -Linux, -macOS, and -Windows. So I've stashed in all three. Now I'm unstashing from all three. Those three stashes are going to come down into the Linux agent, and then I'm going to run JReleaser full release. So JReleaser is going to be running on the Linux agent, but all the files that I want to go up to GitHub are also going to be on the Linux agent by the time the stash runs. Again, a little confusing, I understand, but just think of it this way. I've done my builds, I've created my zip files and my tar.gz files. That happened in this step at line 32. This next stage, I want to take those tar.gzs and those zip files, which is what I'm doing here, and I want to move them somewhere else. Assuming I've moved them somewhere else, now I need to pull those files all back to a central place. I'm getting them all staged and ready to go together, so then that JReleaser can take those files and then release them into GitHub. Now, the only command that I have to run is JReleaser full release. Now, the life cycle for full release has many, many different stages. So you need to review the JReleaser documentation to understand what full release does. But let's take a look at our JReleaser YAML. Now, you don't have to use JReleaser standalone. You could use JReleaser within Maven, you can use JReleaser within Gradle, and you can also use JReleaser within Ant. What you would do in the case of Maven is you would put all the configurations for JReleaser inside of POM.xml. If you were doing it for Gradle, you would put it in build Gradle. But in this example, I wanted to show you what it would look like with just using the JReleaser binary. Now with the JReleaser binary, I can define a JReleaser YAML or a couple of other file formats, but I chose YAML just to keep it simple. I've defined my name, my version, descriptions, all these other things that look similar to what would be in a POM.xml. Since I have a Maven project, a lot of these things would be just pulled right out from the very top properties section of the POM.xml. In my case, I'm not doing any signing. Should you sign your things? Yes, all the time. But for my example, I'm not signing. And then I am going to release to GitHub. Again, since I am not signing never, I also have to mark the sign here as false. And I'm putting in an overwrite flag of true. Again, review the JReleaser documentation to understand all the options you have to use with the GitHub release. And then finally, what I have is the distributions. This is what I'm really going after right now. This is what we're trying to understand how this works. So we have a distributions, and then I give it the name of whatever my application is. In my case, the application is greeting-CLI. The type is going to be native image. And then I'm specifying the path to each of the files that exist right now on my Linux-based agent because I did the unstash. So all the files now live on my Linux-based agent. So now that we've got a JReleaser file, we know we have JReleaser available on all of our agents, but the only one that we care about at this point is the Linux agent. What we need to go ahead and do is let's go ahead and modify our job one more time, and let's go and change it to Jenkins file 3, and let's see what happens when the job completes. So let's go down here to Jenkins file -2. Let's change this to 3 and click on Build Now. And much like last time, we're going to go ahead and go into Blue Ocean and wait for it to complete. And this will take a few minutes. But through the magic of video, it'll only take a few seconds. And now you can see that we have completed our pipeline successfully. Let's go and take a look at release. We can see our unstashes happened, which is good, but let's take a look at JReleaser, which is what we really care about at this point. We can see that it found all the files, it's calculating checksums, it's uploading the files, and then it succeeded after about 33 seconds. Well, let's go over and take a look at it in GitHub. So let's refresh this page, and now we can see that we have a release 001. If we click into it, what we're going to see is a changelog, and this is the changelog that comes in by default. And then here are all the assets, our 2 Linux, our 2 OS X, and our 2 Windows, all uploaded. We have checksums and everything else that we need to be able to now make an announcement that these binaries are ready and available for people to download. Now, if we scroll back up and take a look at the changelog, this is just the default changelog. There are a lot of other configuration options that you can set up to make the changelog look different. So you can go through the documentation for JReleaser and figure out how you want your changelog to look for yourself. But looking at these binaries, I don't want to necessarily have to come over here and download it and unzip it and put it where I want. What I want to use is a package manager in order to go ahead, automatically download this and install it on the system where I want it. Now, if you were paying attention earlier, what we had in our JReleaser file was I had a commented out section for packagers specifically for Brew. So let's edit this file and let's uncomment Brew. So for my Mac, or if I have Brew installed on Linux, then I can use Brew to do the installation for me automatically from this repository. Let's go ahead and click on Commit Changes. We'll go straight to main. And then one final time, let's go back over and let's run our job one more time. So we'll go up here, click on Run. And again, what we'll do is we'll fast forward through this and we'll take a look at it once we're complete. And now that it's completed, let's go take a look at our output of JReleaser full release. What we can see now is we've now published a distribution via Brew. Well, what happened here? Well, we can see here it set up a new repository for me called Homebrew Tap. That's a new repository within GitHub. And then it pushed in this application to that repository. Let's go take a look at that. So let's go over here to homebrew.tap. And if we take a look at that, we take a look at the formula, we see greeting CLI RB. And then it has the access to me for just my macOS at this point. That's the only one I published. And then all the normal code that we would need in order to install the CLI via Brew. So let's go ahead and do that. But before we do that, let's go back over to our repository and let's take a look at what this app is supposed to do. We haven't done that yet. So if we take a look at our greeting command, what we have is a basic command that takes in a description for a name, but if you don't give it a name, it's just going to echo out Pico CLI. And then it's systemout.printf, and then we just say, hello, go commando. All right, so that's just the default code that was generated. And let's go ahead and run brew install darrenpope/tap/greeting-CLI. And what it will do is it will go and look up that repository. It's going to find that formula, install the formula, puts it where I need it to have it. Then once it completes, then we can test it out. So now let's type greeting-CLI. I'll put in my name. It says, hello, Darren, go commando. If I leave that off, then it says, hello, Pico CLI, go commando. So what we've done is we've taken Pico CLI and Quarkus and GraalVM, created 3 native binaries, one for Linux, one for macOS, and one for Windows. And we also published a homebrew formula to be able to install for macOS. If you're creating CLIs in the JVM space, that combination along with JReleaser makes it very simple and easy for you to go ahead and create those and publish them out to GitHub and then make them available through whatever package management solution, whether it's Brew or Chocolatey or whatever, makes it really simple, straightforward, and very streamlined. And by using Jenkins, we can keep our Jenkins files simple. And with an extra step called run command that we have in the shared library, our Jenkins files really streamlined and very straightforward to maintain. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to us on Twitter @CloudBees. If this video was helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to CloudBees TV yet, why not? Take a moment, click on that subscribe button, and then ring that bell, and you'll be notified anytime there's new content available on CloudBees TV. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.